Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making some cornbread and you don't need the oven. Now, fried cornbread is about as old as time, and we did do a video years ago with the traditional hoe cake recipe, which is very, very basic. But what we're doing today is something that's a little more modern, still a few hundred years old at the newest, but it's got a little more flavor than just a traditional hoe cake. Lots of folks don't care for that very raw cornmeal flavor. So this kind of is a little better than that, a little lighter than that, and it makes an excellent quick bread for any meal. In fact, you can even eat leftovers for breakfast if you want to, with a little jam and butter. I mean, that's something that folks did when I was growing up, and even way before that. But the ingredients, what I'm using is a cup of self-rising cornmeal mix. Now, cornmeal mix is a combination of cornmeal, flour, and leavening, and it has baking powder and salt already in it. Now, you can buy all those ingredients separate, but that's a lot of work putting it together, and it's a lot of expense. The cornmeal mix is a much less expensive way to make this than buying all those individual ingredients. Now, I'm not talking about like the cornmeal in a bag that you just add water to, the cornbread muffin mixes. This is just cornmeal, flour, and leavening. That's all it is. And you can get it in a 5-pound bag or a 2-pound bag, just like you do flour and regular cornmeal. And it's just those basic ingredients combined, and then you put the rest of your favorite cornbread recipe in it. And if you have a favorite cornbread recipe, you can certainly cook it the way we're going to be cooking it today. And you need some fat. I'm using about 2 tablespoons of butter, and you want about 2 tablespoons per cup of whatever kind of cornmeal mix, or if you're using straight up cornmeal, you can use straight up cornmeal in this recipe. And I'm going to heat my butter in my skillet just like I would do if I was baking it. And I'm going to add my hot butter to my mix once I mix it up. And I do have my pan already on over here warming up, because you want to cook these in a warm pan. I've got about 1/3 cup of milk and 1 egg. Now that's kind of all you need to make this. But with this 1 egg, if you have to feed a lot of people, you can double your flour or your cornmeal mix and your milk and still just use 1 egg, because I know eggs are getting expensive. But I'm not feeding a crowd today, and I don't want to have a ton of this left over. The thing about quick breads and any homemade bread is that they don't have preservatives. Now, you could make a bigger batch, certainly, and freeze part of them, even keep them in the refrigerator for, probably at least 7 to 10 days. And they would be fine. But if you're making quick breads, it's better to make them fresh. And I have today a little chopped onion. This is a sweet onion. It's a Vidalia onion. You could use any onion in it. You don't have to have onion in it. You could also add about 1 tablespoon of sugar or honey if you like sweet cornbread. Just, kind of flavor this the way that you like your cornbread. My mama, she put onion in everything she made, and she used to love cornbread with onion in it. So I decided to put a little onion in this fried stuff, because it really does add a lot of flavor, and it adds a lot to the meal. It's not just plain cornbread, it's, something a little special. I'm going to start by beating my egg up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and add my milk to my egg so that I've got my wet ingredients combined. And with this cornmeal mix, all my dry ingredients are already combined. Now, if you were starting with flour and cornmeal and baking powder and salt, you would want to mix that together. And I'm going to go ahead and add that into my wet ingredients and mix that up just a tiny bit. If you're on a really tight budget too, you can use water in this. And if you've got leftover bacon grease, you can certainly use leftover bacon grease in this instead of the butter. This is an excellent recipe for your leftover bacon grease. And my mixture's a little bit dry, but I've still got my 2 tablespoons of butter that I'm going to add into it. And I'm going to go ahead and dump my onions in here. This was a really small onion, but I'm kind of making a small batch, so I'm not going to quite use all of them. Probably per cup of cornmeal mix, you would want maybe a 1/4 cup of onions. Of course, you can put as many in as you want to. It's up to you, just however you want to do it. And I did chop them up kind of fine because I want my onions cooked. If you want a little more crispness in the onions when you eat your fried cornbread, you can chop them bigger and they won't get quite as done and they'll be a little more crisp. My mama, she liked hot onions in hers, and she liked them in bigger chunks because she liked to taste that little bit of hot onion. Okay, my butter's kind of brown now, and browning your butter a little bit is going to add a lot of flavor to your cornbread, but heating it is going to just make your cornbread better. And I'm just going to pour that in there and kind of get most of it, leave a little bit of it in the pan, and that's what we'll cook this in. And I'm going to mix that in here, make sure it all gets mixed in there real good. What heating the butter or the bacon grease, or you could use shortening or lard or some kind of oil even if you wanted something healthier. But what heating that does is that it activates the baking powder that's in here, and it just makes it all better. Now you can see this is pretty thick. You could make it a little thinner if you wanted to, but pretty thick is good for these because you kind of, I don't know, scoop them in the pan, I guess. But like I said, you could make it a little thinner, and you just start scooping them out and adding them to the pan. And you can kind of shape these. You can make them round. Of course, if your batter's a little thinner, they'll pour out and they'll be round. But we're just going to cook them a few minutes on each side until they brown. Flatten them out a little bit there, because if you don't flatten them out, they won't get done in the middle, and nobody likes half raw cornbread. I know, especially in the summertime, turning on the oven for 35 or 40 minutes to bake cornbread is just not something that everybody wants to do in the evening when they're cooking dinner and the house is already hot. I mean, when I grew up, we didn't have any air conditioner, so turning on the oven in the evening wasn't always an option on them July and August days. Now that cup is going to make about 6 little cornbread cakes, and like I said, if you have to feed a lot of people with the 1 egg, you can double your milk and double your cornmeal and make 12. For my purposes here, just cooking for 1 person, 6 is going to do quite a few meals for me, and that's plenty enough to make it one time. Now you want to keep an eye on these. You don't want them to burn. It's not going to take them very long before you can flip them. And I'd say, yep, them first ones are ready to flip. You want them nice and golden brown like that. And kind of flip them in the order that you put them in the pan. Now that I've got them flipped, I'm going to cook them about 5 more minutes on this side. But I'm going to go ahead and put a lid on them. Because they're cooking so fast, I want to keep that heat in my skillet to make sure the center of my cornbread gets done. Without that lid, you're going to have to flip them several times, and it's going to take a lot longer to cook them. If you put the lid on them, I mean, I barely was able to get them all in the pan before it was time to start flipping them and then get them all flipped. But putting this lid on them and cooking them for like another 5 minutes, that'll completely cook them because they're not that thick. Whereas if you make it in the oven, you're looking at baking it for 35 minutes, maybe even longer, depending on how big of a pan you're making. So if you need a quick bread for dinner, this is a really good option. It cooks in like 10 minutes, mixes up real quick, and it's something different. It is a very old-fashioned flavor, a very old-fashioned taste. And this is a good recipe for when it's hot. It's also a good recipe for just feeding 1 or 2 people because you can make a small batch. And it's good for feeding a lot of people because you can make it quick. It goes with soups and chilies and stews, anything like that. And cornbread is much more filling than a regular biscuit. So in these times when we're trying to stretch our food and stretch our money and make everything go farther, a cornbread is a really good option for a bread with dinner, or even more like a side dish, especially if you add some onions to it. And you can even add a can of corn and some peppers to it, you know, and even some beans, and do more like a meal out of it almost. So keep that in mind. Get you a bag of cornmeal mix because you don't have to combine all those individual ingredients, and it's cheaper to buy the 1 bag than it is to buy 2 bags and then buy baking powder and, you know, have to add different stuff to it. Keep that in your pantry. That's going to be kind of, I think, crucial over the next several months, where we're seeing more and more shortages and higher prices, and kind of that budget running out before the week or the month runs out. But anyway, this is going to be one of those good recipes that'll get you through, and you can add it to some of those super cheap meals and really fill everybody up and not have folks go away from the table hungry and not have your bank account totally emptied. Now, just in that little bit of time there that we were talking, you can see the other side of my cornbread is nice and brown. And I think it's probably about done. I am going to give it maybe just another, I don't know, another 60 seconds maybe. If they're mushy in the middle, the uncooked cornmeal doesn't taste good. And also I had those onions in there, and I want my onions cooked good. But like I said, that's just a matter of taste and a matter of preference. Fix it how you like it. If you want the big chunks in there so you can taste them, leave them in big chunks. And I do want to share Psalm 37:25 with you. I have been young, and now I am old. Yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging for bread. With things being the way they are, as Christians, we need to take care of each other. We especially need to take care of our families and members of our church. Make sure the people who are close to you have what they need. If God has blessed you, He has blessed you so that you can bless others. So if you are blessed enough to have what you need, make sure you are sharing it with those people around you who are in need and don't have what they need. Be somebody else's blessing. There is nothing greater you can do with your life than to bless someone else. Let's see what these look like. All right, they are definitely done now. They're nice and brown. And where I crowded mine, they're a little bit crumbly. If you don't crowd them, you shouldn't have the crumbles in there. They kind of broke off as I was trying to turn them because they were overcrowded. You don't want to overcook them. Nobody likes burned cornbread. But this is actually the last one we put in, so I'll kind of break it open here. Maybe, oh gosh, it's hot. Let them sit for just, I don't know, 60 seconds anyway when you take them out of the pan. But you can see maybe kind of it's nice and done in the inside. It's not all gooey and doughy. Because like I said, nobody likes gooey, doughy cornbread. So make sure you get it done. This is also a good camping recipe. You know, you could mix this up in just a minute when you're camping and cook it in your skillet. Even cook it, you know, on a fire in your skillet. And it's something fun that the kids can mix up, especially if you've got teenagers and stuff and you're maybe taking them on some kind of outdoor adventure. This will be a great recipe for that. Keep this one. It's one of those, again, that got our parents and our grandparents through some hard times, but it's one of those that will get you through this. So hang on to it. I want to thank y'all so much for joining us again in the Hillbilly Kitchen. And I want to ask you, if you haven't already, to please click like and subscribe before you leave us, and share our videos with your friends. Until next time, remember to put God first.